Imagine for a second a single failing military campaign on the shores of Turkey. Now imagine that one failure triggering a massive, disastrous chain reaction that would eventually set the entire Middle East ablaze. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the summer and fall of 1915. It's this absolutely pivotal window in the Great War where the Entente's desperate gambles didn't just fail. They fractured the region, they birthed brutal proxy wars, and ironically, they ended up prolonging the global conflict.
Okay, let's dive right into this roadmap. We've got a lot of ground to cover, from the shores of Turkey to the mountains of Persia. We'll start with 1, the Gallipoli stalemate, move into 2, the tragic offensives, cover 3, evacuation and strategic fallout, explore 4, the Mesopotamian misadventure, dig into 5, the Persian proxy war, and wrap up with 6, a war prolonged.
All right, part 1, the Gallipoli stalemate, a summer of attrition. Let's set the stage here. It's August 1915. The Ottoman Empire is definitely reeling, but at Gallipoli, they are facing an absolute existential threat. If the Entente takes the peninsula, Istanbul falls, period. So to break this grueling deadlock, British General Sir Ian Hamilton orchestrates a massive August offensive. He's commanding an expanded force of 15 divisions against the Ottoman Fifth Army, which had itself bulked up to 16 divisions. Hamilton's plan was wildly ambitious, relying on 3 main prongs. First, an assault at Hellas just to pin down the Ottoman reserves. Second, a major push from the Anzac sector right along the rugged Sarıyer Ridge. And third, a surprise landing of fresh British forces at Suvla Bay. On paper, it looked like a masterstroke. In reality, well, it was about to completely unravel.
Which brings us to part 2, the tragic August offensives, blood on the ridges.
When we zoom in on the actual tactical level of Hamilton's grand plan, we see some of the most harrowing, tragic moments of 1915. Take the assault on the Neck, for example. At 4 a.m. on August 7th, there's this catastrophic synchronization error. The naval bombardment lifts early, but the infantry advance is delayed. And that gives the Ottoman defenders these precious, crucial minutes to man their trenches. So when the Australian Light Horse finally charges, they're cut down within seconds by machine gun fire. At 4:45 a.m., a third wave meets the exact same fate. Actually, a cancellation order was issued for the 4th wave, but it didn't even reach the troops in time, and they charged right into a hail of bullets. It wasn't until nightfall that stretcher bearers could finally crawl out to rescue just 138 survivors.
Over on Chinook Bear, the fighting was honestly just as brutal. 760 New Zealanders somehow managed to fight their way to the summit, but by the evening of August 8th, after facing relentless counterattacks and just devastating crossfire, an unbelievable 711 of those 760 men had become casualties. Just staggering.
Meanwhile, the third prong of Hamilton's offensive at Suvla Bay was completely falling apart. The landings were totally chaotic. Units were getting mixed up in the dark. The chain of command had utterly broken down. British commanders hesitated on the beaches, making disappointingly slow progress. And this deadly hesitation, it gave Ottoman reinforcements, led by a brilliant commander you might have heard of named Mustafa Kemal, the exact time they needed to occupy the surrounding ridges and effectively trap the British forces on the beaches below. And the cost of that hesitation was immense. To put that into perspective, on August 21st, British forces attempted to break out by assaulting Scimitar Hill. But, blinded by mist and smoke from burning undergrowth, they basically marched directly into Ottoman crossfire. In a single day, on that one hill, the British suffered over 5,300 casualties.
Okay, part 3. Evacuation and strategic fallout, the ripple effect.
These horrific losses in August basically forced the Entente planners to face a grim reality. They simply couldn't break the Ottoman lines. And this chart brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the tragedy. Of the over 800,000 men who fought at Gallipoli, 500,000 became casualties. 500,000. Over 100,000 men died, with the Ottomans suffering the heaviest toll, losing over 56,000 lives defending their homeland. The British, French, and Anzac forces suffered absolutely catastrophic losses as well.
But as you'll see, the fallout extended way beyond the battlefield. It caused a massive strategic domino effect. First, the Entente's failure convinced Bulgaria to officially enter the war on the side of the Central Powers in October. This was a real game changer because it established a direct rail link all the way from Belgrade to Istanbul, allowing heavy artillery and munitions from Germany to just flow freely into Turkey. Facing this newly reinforced enemy, the Entente really had no choice but to execute a massive, completely secret evacuation of over 250,000 troops. And geopolitically, this brilliant Ottoman victory terrified Allied planners, who now deeply feared a widespread Muslim jihad igniting across their colonial empires.
Let's transition to part 4, the Mesopotamian misadventure,
seeking prestige.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast between reality and reaction. Driven by a massive fear of losing face, the British political reaction stood in stark contrast to their actual military reality. The reality was a humiliating defeat at Gallipoli and a fast-rising threat of rebellion in Persia. So, their reaction? Instead of consolidating their forces, they desperately scrambled to seek a prestige victory to somehow restore their image. They decided, let's march on Baghdad. Led by Major General Townshend, the British advance actually started pretty smoothly. They captured Kut unopposed in late September. But the Ottomans used that delay to prepare. When Townshend finally advanced to Ctesiphon in November, he walked right into a trap. Waiting for him were over 18,000 Ottomans hidden in perfectly concealed trenches. The resulting clash was incredibly bloody. The British suffered 4,600 casualties. That is a massive 40% of their attacking force, and they couldn't even properly treat their wounded. Recognizing his position was totally untenable, Townshend was forced to retreat back to Kut.
And honestly, that retreat sealed their fate. Townshend falls back to Kut with just 11,000 men. The pursuing Ottoman Sixth Army quickly surrounds the town, and the devastating siege of Kut begins. The British pursuit of prestige had ended in yet another catastrophic, inescapable trap.
Part 5. The Persian Proxy War, Fomenting Rebellion.
So, while massive armies are clashing in Gallipoli and Mesopotamia, a covert shadow war is absolutely exploding in a third theater, Persia. Treat this slide like a scorecard, because it's a confusing, chaotic web of factions. The Central Powers wanted to disrupt British oil production and incite a holy war. You have German and Ottoman agents uniting a massive proxy force, including a 7,000-strong Persian gendarmerie led by Swedish volunteer officers, alongside German mercenaries and Arab jihadists, all backed by a pro-German provisional government. Arrayed against them are the Entente forces, the highly aggressive Russian expeditionary cavalry moving down from the north, and the British South Persia rifles drawn from local tribes, supporting a pro-Entente cabinet. Initially, the Central Powers proxy forces gained some serious ground, but the Russians retaliated forcefully. Under General Barato, the Russian cavalry launched a sweeping two-pronged offensive on November 23rd. By the 25th, they pulled off a decisive flanking maneuver that completely routed roughly 900 gendarmes and 1,200 mercenaries. It was incredibly fast. By December 3rd, the aggressive Russian push had captured Hamadan, effectively crushing the core of the German-Ottoman proxy uprising. The sheer brutality of this proxy war was staggering, though. Let me give you an example. When a mixed rebel force marched on Tehran to seize the Shah, a counter-mission of 688 Russian Cossacks intercepted them at Rabat Karam. After being pinned down by heavy artillery for 6 straight hours, the Cossacks just charged the mountain, literally routing and hacking 245 of them to death, securing the Shah and completely locking down the Russian left flank. Just relentless.
Finally, Part 6. A War Prolonged, the Legacy of 1915.
Bringing all three of these disparate, desperate geographical theaters back together, the irony of the Entente's failed gambles is just profound. Rather than knocking the Ottoman Empire out of the conflict, the British failures actually strengthened the Central Powers. Think about it. The Gallipoli disaster ironically lengthened the Great War. It linked Berlin and Istanbul, making the Turco-German alliance stronger and far better supplied. It freed up thousands of battle-hardened Ottoman soldiers, resulting in a reinvigorated and aggressive Ottoman Sixth Army in Mesopotamia. And it ultimately fractured the broader Middle East into brutal, long-lasting proxy conflicts that would echo for decades.
Which leaves us with this crucial question to ponder. With the Turco-German alliance newly linked by rail, a completely reinvigorated Ottoman army on the march, and a desperate siege currently starving 11,000 British forces trapped at Kut, what fresh disasters does 1916 hold for the Entente in the Middle East? We'll definitely have to explore that in the future, but until then, keep questioning what you think you know about the Great War. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.